is the EnergyMakers Show, featuring energy industry leaders, domain experts, energy technology innovators, and public policy makers, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the EnergyMakers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Well, welcome. Today we're visiting with David Crane, CEO of NRG, one of Fortune's 300 top companies and our nation's largest independent power producer. David, good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, David, NRG is involved with many things. Can you give me some sense of NRG and your business?
Well, NRG starts as an independent power company, which means we own power plants, but the independent power industry is about innovation, and in recent years we've expanded. We have a very big retail presence, and through our two subsidiaries, Reliant and Green Mountain, so markets where people have choice on retail electricity, we are big into that business. And increasingly, in the last few years, we've gone very aggressively into sustainable energy, which I think is the highest growth part of our industry. So I really think of it as a three-legged stool.
Well, and on that clean energy side, you hear a lot from consumers about concern that going green can cost more, and that's why they wouldn't want to take that on. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we recognize that is a consumer perception, but when consumers think about going green, historically they haven't been thinking about going green in the energy space because they really haven't had the alternative of picking green energy. Usually they're thinking about organic food, which I think is usually more expensive than non-organic food, or other areas. But in the energy area, I think one of the pleasant surprises that people will have if they look at it is being green does not necessarily mean to be need to be more expensive. The way we like to think of it is being green in terms of energy uses is being innovative and being smart. And if you are innovative and smart on it, you can actually save on your monthly energy bill.
Well, and by going green, and if consumers are looking to do that, it's a pretty broad topic, right? You know, you have your fuel side, your power side, you've got your efficiency side. In your view, what are some of the game-changing technologies within that mix that we should keep an eye on?
Well, interestingly, people think of energy as being very complicated, but if a person sits down and thinks about their energy use, it really it bifurcates. It splits into you use energy at your house, which is mainly electricity, and you use energy in your car, which is mainly gasoline. And one of the interesting things about the green energy revolution is that we actually see those two things coming together through the form of an electric vehicle, which will bring your transportation energy more into your house energy. And then you have to focus on where your house gets energy and how you manage your energy use in the house. And if you think of electric vehicles, and if you think of smart meters, which in an interactive way will allow you to manage the energy use in your house so much less energy is wasted. And then if you think of an electric system that as a country is getting cleaner every day with wind power, with solar power, with more environmental controls on conventional generation, and we're involved in all these areas, you get into what's a very attractive picture for everybody. You get a much cleaner and less expensive energy solution with no compromise in lifestyle.
Well, I know that, and you talked about solar. Let's dig a little more deeply there. You're involved with solar projects across the country. Can you tell us a little bit about NRG's solar efforts?
Well, it's interesting because when I think maybe my first exposure to energy at all, the first time I can recall thinking about it, I was in third grade. I don't want to tell you how long ago that was, but let's just say it was in the 1960s.
Fair enough.
And I remember them showing us a little film in class, and they were talking about future energy sources, and there was a cartoon at the end of it, and it basically said, your home electricity bill is free this month, courtesy, and then they had a big picture of the sun, and the sun was smiling. And so the idea that we could make a lot of energy from the sun has been around for my entire life, but I think the technology took a while to develop, and then it was very expensive. But what's happened in the last few years is there's been a real breakthrough, and the cost of solar installation has dropped precipitously over the last 3 or 4 years. And so what we're doing is we're doing a full range of solar projects. We have very large solar projects principally out in the desert where it's out in the California, Arizona desert where it's obviously very sunny. Several hundred megawatts, which makes us by far the largest solar company in the United States in terms of power that's either operating or under construction. But beyond that, what's the real beauty of solar, and this is a real advantage of solar relative to wind power, is that solar scales up and it scales down. And so we have a whole range of very interesting projects that are more what we would call distributed solar at facilities within cities. And also we just announced a deal to do a major rooftop solar project with on warehouses around the country, and it would double the amount of rooftop solar in the United States, just our one initiative. So we really want to be in all range of the solar, from massive projects in the desert to actually solar on your rooftop. And the last thing I would say about that, actually through our two retail arms, Reliant and Green Mountain, both are offering solar products for people who want to actually have solar right on their garage. And so we run the gamut.
Well, and I've heard the debate of do you focus on utility solar, distributed home solar, and which is more economic? And it sounds like you're trying both.
Well, there's no doubt right now that if you look at unit costs, like with most things, economies of scale suggest that doing gigantic solar projects is significantly less expensive than going house to house. I mean, just the moving house to house, putting the ladder up, getting on the roof, it just takes more time than solar installation in the desert. But distributed solar has other advantages. First of all, it's sort of what we would say it's on the other side of the meter, so it gives the owner of that solar panel some electricity that's generating right at their house. They're not 100% dependent on the grid, which most people are right now. The other thing that we like to point out to businesses that are thinking of putting on solar panels is solar panels are mounted on some sort of frame, and it gives room for advertisement, and innovation in the solar industry is really exciting.
Well, and you mentioned EVs. When we come back, I'd like to explore that a little bit further. This is the EnergyMakers Show, and we'll be right back with David Crane.
This is the EnergyMakers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now back to the EnergyMakers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
David, America loves their cars. Can you tell us a little bit about what NRG is doing to help power some of those vehicles?
America does love their cars, and that's why we want to be involved with cars, because if you think about when do Americans think about energy and the cost of energy, they only think about it really at the pump. Yeah. And so yes, that it's true. So electric vehicles, I think the most exciting thing that's happened in the car industry in a long time, and by extension, it's also the most exciting thing, really, literally by extension cord, it's the most exciting thing I think to have happen to the electric industry, as I like to say, since the air conditioner. So what we're doing is, the issue that you have with any sort of alternative energy vehicle is how do you fuel it? Because whether you're talking about compressed natural gas or hydrogen, fuel cell, or electric vehicles, and we say that the enormous advantage that electric vehicles have over other alternative energy vehicles is we have a ready substitute for the 148,000 service stations that Americans depend upon for their traditional vehicle, and that's your home electricity system.
Right.
So the service station of the future is your garage if you own an electric vehicle, but it still raises the issue of, well, sometimes you're out and about and you need to be filled up, and it's a particular phenomena with electric cars where owners report what's known as range anxiety. So what we've announced that we're doing here in Texas, in Harris County, Texas, Houston, and in Dallas-Fort Worth is that through an initiative that we call eVgo, we're setting up a network of chargers so that in general terms, wherever you drive within those two metropolitan areas, you'll be roughly within 5 miles of one of our chargers. And so And the business model we're using is one that's akin to a cell phone model. It's a subscription model. You don't pay for actual usage of those chargers. We actually don't expect people to use the chargers very much. We just expect them to gain confidence by the fact that the charger's there if they need it.
And where do they find the chargers? Are they on the streets? Are they combined with some other retail establishment?
Well, we worked a lot on that, because when you do a pull in for a charge, and the idea is that you're going to spend 10 to 15 minutes charging, and you'll get a 40 or 50 mile boost in that time, which will get you to where you need to go. So we've worked with some partners, host partners, and our initial host partner here in Texas has been Walgreens. Best Buy is going to host chargers. There's a regional supermarket chain in Texas called HEB that's also going to host chargers. So there are others as well. So we've picked partners who have strategically located stores. They have the space in their own dedicated parking lot for our chargers, but also people who share our commitment, both to customer service and also to a sustainable environment.
Well, and I know from what I hear, my friends in California are very pleased that you've been driving a Tesla for a long time. But do I hear that we've got another happy seller of cars?
Well, yes. I mean, our system is a system that can be adapted to people who are buying plug-in hybrids like the Chevy Volt, which Chevy Volt has gotten rave reviews from people who own it. But our system really appeals to people who are buying pure electric vehicles.
Right.
And the Nissan Leaf is now in the market. I have one. It's a phenomenal car. But our system ultimately will not be dedicated to any one manufacturer. You don't have to go out and buy a Nissan Leaf or a Chevy Volt or a Tesla. By our estimation, within a year to 18 months, the American consumer could be choosing among 10, 11, or 12 different types of plug-in vehicles that will be offered virtually by all the traditional car manufacturers and also by some new ones.
Well, and providing that network, it's my understanding that you've done this without federal funding. It wasn't the federal government or some grant program that drove you into this space. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you, as an energy company, think to be innovative in this way?
Well, the capital commitment we've made to build out these charging networks, I mean, is for the two Texas cities is about $25 million, which is a substantial amount of money, but not a amount of money that's not within our means. We see it as a huge opportunity. If our subscription model is successful, we will reach break even after a few thousand subscribers. That'll take a while, just because it'll take a while for plug-in vehicles to get to the market in that number, but we're willing to wait because it's such a great idea. As part of the stimulus, the government has funded chargers that are going in various places in Texas and around the country. But what all that's lacking is that they're not looking at it holistically. And what you see is a lot of municipal governments, including the city of Houston government, that want to have chargers. And so it's quite common right now in the United States to have 2 chargers out in front of City Hall. And certainly in California, you'd see that everywhere. But 2 chargers in front of City Hall is not a network that is going to help someone who's going from the mall to pick up their child at the school. You really need to have a comprehensive plan. And as far as I know, what we have announced for both Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth is unmatched anywhere in the country. And so we're very excited about it. And it's getting a lot of notice. I just came back from Washington, and what we're doing in Texas is a lot of people are looking at that in Washington.
Well, and I'm interested to talk more about policy. But before we get to that, can you tell us your model that you've built for Houston and in Dallas? Will you expand and bring these chargers outside of this region?
Well, we're interested in that. It's sort of a complicated analysis because, and what we found is that you really have to focus on a couple things. First of all, you have to focus on where the manufacturers are selling plug-in vehicles, because they're not offering their plug-in vehicles, neither Chevrolet nor Nissan is offering their plug-in vehicles in all 50 states. So you have to go where the cars are, basically, number one. And secondly, you have to look at the nature of the the structure of the electric industry to make sure that a non-regulated company like us is allowed to compete. But we are interested, and I would tell you, basically at this point, with Texas as our start, our focus at this point is on the two coasts, because certainly California has made more of a commitment to electric vehicles than any other state, and so that's a very interesting market for us. And the Northeast United States is very interesting as well. It has certain advantages. Distances are shorter.
Sure.
And I think there's going to be a focus on electric vehicles there as well. So that's really our next geographic areas of interest.
Well, and did I hear you're doing something for the sports fans of the world?
What you're referring to is we just announced a deal with the Washington Redskins at FedEx Field outside Washington, D.C., to provide actually solar pavilions over something like 800 parking spaces in one of their parking lots. And we're going to put electric vehicle chargers in there as well, starting with just 10 electric vehicle chargers, because you have to wait for the cars to get there. But ultimately, we can expand that number. But the solar array is so large that it will handle the load of the stadium except for, I mean, if they're fully blowing and going on a Sunday night game with all the lights, they'll need to bring more power from the grid. But there's a lot of activity at the stadium, 7 days a week, and we will cover that with these solar panels.
Just a moment ago, you were telling us that you came back from Washington. I'd like, if we could, when we come back, to talk a little bit about energy policy.
Happy to do that.
This is the Energy Makers Show, and we'll be right back.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
David, when we left, we were about to talk about energy policy, and I've heard from a lot of our investor friends and CEO friends that there's some real concern about our nation's ability to compete without a long-term durable energy policy. Just broadly, can you give us your take on maybe where we are and where we might look to go?
As a blinding glimpse of the obvious, as you say, we don't have a long-term energy policy, and we haven't for the 40 years since the first and second oil shock of the 70s, and it doesn't get any better. It just gets more complicated. I mean, I had actually hoped for a while that you could see a confluence of the right and the left of the political spectrum in the center, because particularly if you include sustainable energy, wind, solar power, it's domestic energy, so there's no importation of anything involved in there. And then you get electric vehicles and reducing America's strategic dependence on foreign sources of oil, which is something that appeals to all Americans, but particularly the right side of the spectrum. You could come together and have an energy policy that everyone agrees with. But I feel that right now, probably in Washington, energy policy is as polarized as every other thing that is in Washington, and that's a shame. But we need it. Unfortunately, it'll probably take a third oil shock for there to be some sort of consensus that develops.
Well, I've often said that Congress has this inability to think strategically about our energy needs over, say, a 30-year time horizon. But the people who do understand how to plan and model for that are our friends in the incumbent energy space and our traditional energy friends. Are you seeing, and I know you're deeply engaged in Washington and having these discussions, trying to better educate Congress, are you seeing others get engaged, and do you have some sense of optimism that maybe over the next 2 to 5 years we'll chart a more certain path?
I probably should be optimistic, because when you're talking to the media, you're supposed to be optimistic, but I would say I was more pessimistic, because I think the challenge is that we have so many issues in the country that are outside the energy space that, if anything, awareness that energy is this huge issue, and a huge issue that's gone unaddressed essentially for 40 years, is not even really falling into the first tier. Between the budget and you very quickly could say budget, healthcare, immigration. There are several issues that people in Washington seem to be more focused on getting reelected. I wouldn't say that I'm overly optimistic. The other concern I have is that there's really no leading politician, I would say, from either party that really has sort of staked their identity on being an energy person. President Obama, Vice President Biden, neither has ever said that I'm an energy person, and the leading candidates in the Republican field, I don't think any of them have said that they were an energy person, at least amongst the people who are announced so far.
Well, David, without any policy, how do we solve some of these big problems?
Well, I think there can be some policy. I just don't think there's going to be this overarching, incredibly insightful, dictated policy as you would see in China, for instance. But even though I'm pessimistic about too much government vision in this area, what I'm really excited about is what I see coming out of the private sector in the energy space. And the amount of innovation that comes from the Silicon Valley types, regardless of whether they're in Silicon Valley, is just truly exciting. And we have a collaboration with General Electric and ConocoPhillips, a new energy technology venture capital fund, $300 million fund. And we're just seeing some things that are so exciting. We have these sessions once a quarter where we hear from the management of 5 to 10 of the best ideas, and I just come out of those meetings brimming with optimism and excitement. And certainly there's innovation going on in energy technologies really around the world, but I would still say that I'm seeing much more of it in this country. And this isn't just laboratory type innovation. We're talking about innovative technologies that are ready to be scaled up, deployed in the field, or if it's a manufacturing technique, scale manufacturing. And we want to invest in it, we want to make a profit on it, but we also want to deploy these technologies through the other parts of our company. So it's very exciting.
Well, David, what a perfect way to end the interview. I'll tell you, I do find impressive that you're involved with fossil energy, clean energy, policy, and now investing. It's an incredible drive forward, and we're lucky to have a CEO like you helping educate our policymakers, make some prudent investments and scale. And I must tell you, I'm just very impressed, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps this week's episode of the Energy Makers Show. The Energy Makers can be seen online at TheEnergyMakers.com and heard on the radio nationwide. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.